These army maps, photographs and medals of the First and the Second World Wars belong to my father. He died in 1969. It has taken me a long time to make sense of what he did, and to resolve a mystery about his time in the army, especially at the end of the Second World War. But first things first. My father was born in Blaengarrow in 1896. He and his parents moved to Port Talbot, where he worked in the steelworks. There, in 1913, at the age of 17, he signed up for 4 years with the Territorial Force. World War I began in 1914. To join the army, he was required to swear an oath of allegiance to king and country. His signature is witnessed. Many of his age, some younger, did the same. His medical was held in Cardiff 2 days later. His inspection report shows his age and height, and that he can breathe and see. He is declared fit for the Territorial Force and for his service in the 7th Cyclists Battalion Welsh Regiment. He went first to Penally in Pembrokeshire. This was in July 1913. He was embodied when war was declared on 5th of August 1914. He moved about a bit after that, and in 6 months he was promoted to Lance Corporal, and in April 1916 a Corporal. Then his war in France started. His record shows that on 26th of July 1916 he sailed from Southampton and disembarked in Rouen. 1 week later he is attached to the South Lancashire Regiment in the field. Where he went from Rouen in this first visit to France is not recorded. His rank changed temporarily from corporal to private on embarkation, and some days later he was promoted in the field to corporal. He served for a year in France with the South Lancashire Regiment as part of the British Expeditionary Force, and returned in January 1917, presumably because he was recommended as a candidate for a temporary commission. In March 1917 he went to the Officers' Cadet Battalion, Bristol, and in May to the Officers' Cadet Battalion at Keble College, Oxford, where he also played cricket. He was commissioned as a temporary second lieutenant in the Welsh Regiment, and was back in France by July 1917. The following year, on 8th of November 1918, he was mentioned in a dispatch by Field Marshal Sir Douglas Haig. This led to an award for gallant and distinguished service in the field. His field at this time was probably at the front, behind the British lines. The maps that he brought back with him give us a clue to where he was between the 8th and when the armistice was signed on the 11th. Here are the areas that they cover. This larger-scale secret map is well used. It shows military features such as British and enemy trenches and the town of Albert. I like to think that it was hereabouts that he showed his gallantry. Second Lieutenant T. M. Matthews was promoted to a temporary lieutenant in 1918, 2 days after Christmas, while still in France. On the 10th of May 1919 he left France at the age of 23. On the day following he was released from military service. 21 years later, married with 3 children, that's me on the left, in 1940, and living in Pontrydyfen, he was in a second war. This was eventful, but in a different way altogether.